Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about personal statements, and there's just been so many questions I've been asked about this. Most of these that you all have sent me through the little question box I put up on my Instagram a few weeks ago. And I thought the best people to ask these questions to will be Stuart and Julia, who are the admissions tutor at my college, Girton College at Cambridge. So without any further ado, I'm going to quickly ask Stuart and Julia to give a brief introduction of themselves and their role and what that entails. So yeah, over to you guys.
Hi everyone. So my name is Stuart, as Shivani says, and I'm one of the two admissions tutors alongside Julia. And my responsibility is for the arts and humanities subjects. So that's a whole range of different subjects here at Girton and in Cambridge, ranging from economics through to English and geography, history, and Anglo-Saxon, Norse and Celtic, and all sorts of different things. So I work with the colleagues in those specialist subjects to help choose the students that will come and study at our college. And I teach myself as well in modern and medieval languages. That's my area.
So, hello, I'm Julia, and I have exactly the same role as Stuart, except for the sciences. So I have the overall overview of science. And what I mean by sciences here is that not only natural sciences, but computer science, engineering, maths, medicine, and veterinary medicine. As well as being admissions tutor at Girton, I'm an astrophysicist, and I teach and run the practical classes at the Cavendish Laboratory in Physics.
Thank you so much, Stuart and Julia. So the first question I have is just the overall question of what actually is the purpose of the personal statement?
So I'm going to try and answer this very quickly. Through your application, we want to discover whether you'll be the right fit for the course you've applied for. So we want to know about you. What motivates you, your academic interests, and your enthusiasms? And one way we can assess this is through your personal statement. So your personal statement is your opportunity to really sell yourself to us. At Cambridge, all admissions decisions are based solely on academic criteria. So we're looking both at your ability now and your potential to do well. And so in your personal statement, we'd like you to explain your reasons for wanting to study subject, demonstrate your enthusiasm for and commitment to your chosen course, express any particular interests within the field, and outline how you've pursued your subject interest in your own time. We may, and often do, use this information as the basis for discussion at interview.
Amazing. So the next question is something that I myself have found myself asking, and many people I think find themselves in the same position, which is I have no idea where to start. And do you have any tips for this?
Yeah, as you said, it's a really common question actually we have is, where do I start? What's the first thing I need to think about? Hopefully you've chosen a course that you know you're going to enjoy and that you're going to get a lot out of when you apply to a university. And of course, it's not just Cambridge, it's up to 5 universities on the UCAS application. So hopefully you've already started to think a bit about what sparked your interest in these subjects. And that's a really good starting point to think, well, what can I talk about in my personal statement? What was it that really made me think, actually, I want to study this subject for 3 or 4 years of my life? And also then thinking, okay, so I find this really interesting. What do I enjoy as well, academically speaking? So just jot down a few ideas about how you would answer that question if someone asked you those questions right now. You know, what do you enjoy? What really interests you? What do you want to get out of studying this subject in more depth at university level? And then I suppose if it might depend a little bit on what the course is that you want to do as to what to do next. So if it's a natural follow on from a subject you're currently studying at school or in college, so let's say history, for example, you're doing history A level, you want to apply to study history, then you might start to think, well, what have I enjoyed in my A level subjects? What have I found really interesting here? And then start to expand beyond that and think about other things and other topics or areas that perhaps relate to that you could then explore in your own time and independently, because that's the kind of thing we want to see. If it's a new subject, so let's say perhaps medicine or engineering or perhaps maybe economics, or we have a course at Cambridge called Land Economy, which is unique, for example, then you want to kind of make sure you understand what's involved in that subject. So your research might start there, thinking, what would I be doing? What would I be learning about? And then thinking, how does that relate to the kind of things I'm currently studying? And again, asking yourself, what is it in your current subjects that perhaps links to the study of that subject at degree level, and exploring some of the things that you might find really useful there. So there are lots of links. If you go to the Cambridge University website, you can actually find some recommendations of things that you can start to explore and read or watch, or whatever it might be for your subject.
Thank you so much, Stuart. And if I can just add to that, I think for me, myself, what I found useful was first making a list of your achievements and relevant academic hobbies or experiences that you've had. So you just have a reference checklist as to what you want to put in there first. You just gather all the content and brainstorm about that. And then you decide how you want to structure it and like how you want to, make it more creative, the way you're writing and everything. But it's useful to have just a list of the things that you have done so you can refer back to. And one more thing I'd say is I usually use this tip to not start at the beginning, because I find that opening sentences are often the hardest. And there's a lot of pressure to, have a hook or like an interesting opening sentence that sets up the stage for the rest of your personal statement. So I'd say focus on the body first and then keep thinking about how you'd want to introduce your personal statement, and it will come towards the end. So don't start at the beginning. So yeah, I hope you both agree with those tips.
Oh, absolutely. I think, yeah, that's a really good tip.
Thank you so much. So kind of following up from this, do you have a recommended structure for a personal statement?
So I think here what we're thinking about is a more general aspect of the personal statement. It's really a short academic essay about yourself and your motivation. And we should be left with a clear sense of where your interest lies and your suitability for the course. To that end, we recommend that around 80% of your personal statement should concentrate on your motivation to do the subject, why you want to do it, what excites you about it, and how you're furthering your interests through supercurricular activities. All those points that Stuart made earlier. In the last 20%, you can discuss your other extracurricular interests. As Shivani has just said, the beginning is always a bit tricky. The first sentence should really show your enthusiasm for the course. So you should perhaps talk about something that really excites you, so that you can make the person feel this is something that you would really like to do. And then also try to tie everything together at the end and finish on a positive note that leaves the admissions tutor with a really positive impression about you.
Thank you so much, Julia. And I think you've mentioned the difference between supercurricular and extracurricular. And can I just ask if you could clarify the distinction between those?
Yes, so supercurricular means areas which have a direct relationship to the subject that you want to study. So we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. Whereas extracurricular are things which sometimes have a relationship to what you're doing, but could, for example, be something completely different. You might be somebody who wants to study medicine, and you're working very carefully and looking at biological issues and so on and so forth. But you might also enjoy playing hockey, for example, and things like that. So they're things that aren't quite so directly related to your course.
Thank you, Julia. And I think you've also touched upon the important point that a personal statement is basically you selling yourself or explaining your kind of academic life in a page or so. And I think a common problem that arises with personal statements and then later in the future with CVs and other official documents you need to write about your achievements is I feel uncomfortable selling myself. And how do I get over this, or any tips for this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And everybody feels like that. And we all do. And it's one of those things that we have to do for job applications as well, etc., isn't it? So, it can be difficult. But the important thing is to remember that we're not really interested in your personality, but really rather how you come across as a student, as a potential academic. So we're interested in what you're doing for your supercurricular activities, for example, as you've just been hearing of Julia talking about. We're interested in your potential and how well you can do at university. And so good, clear writing about these activities that you've been engaged with will be how you sell yourselves. Yeah, so don't worry about having to try and impress anybody particularly, and it's not a competition about you being the best of the field. It's just about being strong enough to get a place at the university.
Thank you so much, Stuart. And I think one top tip I've received from, now these workshops I'm attending for how to write a CV is that there's a difference between being egoistic and just being respectfully listing down the things you've done, and selling yourself doesn't mean that you're extremely proud of everything you've done and you're just showing off, because this is the only chance you're going to get to talk about your achievements with the admissions tutor. So I think it's that fine line between being humble but being truthful, and then being egoistic and showing off. And I think it all boils down to language. But yeah, I think it is something worth thinking about and eventually becoming comfortable with, because you will have to be okay telling people what you've done in your life, because it is something you should be proud of, because we've all worked hard to get where we are. So I think it is worth thinking about for the long run to become more comfortable with selling yourself. The next question I have is, what do you look for in a personal statement as an admissions tutor?
I think we've probably already touched on some of the answers for this, actually, really, because we are interested to see how you would be as a student on our degree course. And that's really what we want to understand from reading your personal statement. So we want to see that exploration of the academic field that's relevant to your degree course. So as we've already been saying, you start that process by listing some things that you found interesting and enjoyable and relevant in a supercurricular way. And so then you would focus that list into perhaps 3 or 4 things. So we're looking to see that you've got something interesting and academic to say about 3 or 4 related aspects to the degree course that you want to study with us, to the academic skills, the academic knowledge perhaps that you would be addressing. And we're not expecting you to know everything already, of course, otherwise why would we want to admit you to the degree and teach you? But we want to see that you've got that intellectual curiosity and that you've had a chance to have a think about some of these aspects that are relevant. So in an arts and humanities context, that often will be based around reading, or perhaps viewing films or documentaries or podcasts, for example, or perhaps even visits to museums or exhibitions, things that will be relevant to the kinds of things you would be studying on your course. I don't know, from a sciences point of view, Julia?
And from a sciences point of view, I think very similar things. I think if you go to the harder sciences like maths and physics and so on, looking at a great love of sort of basic problem solving is a really important thing. And again, there's lots of material on the internet that you can use in order to do that sort of thing, and you can tell people about it. And there are so many things available on the internet that you can look at and focus in on, and that actually getting involved in will allow you to tell us what really excites you about the subject that you're doing, because that's the thing, one of the things we really want to know, because sometimes it can be difficult when you're studying at university, and we want to know that you will really enjoy what you're doing when you actually get here.
Yeah.
And I think just leading on from there, speaking of demonstrating interest in the course, we often hear this piece of advice called show and don't tell. But it can be hard demonstrating interest in our course. And I love how you've touched upon these wide variety of methods and ways that you can show this. And it's not just restricted to further reading. And we see so many people just dropping in book titles in their personal statement just for the sake of it. But do you have any other tips for those who are struggling to demonstrate their interest in the course, perhaps despite having a lot of it?
So I think one of the really important things to do, and we have emphasized this all the way along, is to ask yourself why you want to study the course. What is it about it that makes you think that you really would like to spend 3 years studying it? And you can think about it in the context of the A-level subjects you're currently doing. For example, how do they fit in with it, and how have they led you to think this is an area you're keen to know more about? You can then write about this, as it's extremely relevant. I think this is where supercurricular activities are really, really useful, Because if you're not interested in doing any of these, you should probably ask yourself the question, why do I want to study the subject further? Maybe you should, for example, pick on something you've learned through your A-level studies at school, read a book about it, or research it more on the internet. And hopefully this will spark some ideas and questions of your own. So it's that sort of approach of having a look at why you want to do things and then emphasizing that. So it's really important that you actually show why you're interested in things.
Thank you, Julia. The next question I think is quite a tricky one because, for example, I in Cambridge applied to the natural sciences course, but I remember at other unis, the course names are slightly different. So I remember applying for biomedical science, biological science, and some people like to apply to quite different courses, I must say. So for those who are looking to apply to different courses in different universities, any tips on tailoring the personal statement to kind of encompass all of the courses they're applying to?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to say is actually don't worry if you are in that situation. It's actually very common, really, and as you said yourself. And as admissions tutors, we're very used to reading personal statements in which we understand that this candidate is very clearly applying for a range of related courses, but not exactly the same course at a range of universities. So it's in no way a disadvantage if you have to include a supercurricular activity which is not related to the course you're applying for at Cambridge, but is clearly going to be relevant for another course choice at another university. So please don't feel that you can't do that, and because it is important you do write with all of those universities in mind as your potential audiences for that. The important thing to remember about the Cambridge application is that you do actually get the opportunity to write a little bit of extra personal statement that's only seen by us at Cambridge. It's a lot shorter than the UCAS personal statement, and you complete this in the week following your application being submitted as part of the supplementary questionnaire, or the SFAQ as we call it, the FAQ. And so only our eyes at Cambridge get to see this extra bit of personal statement. So you can really tailor it directly to us. It's optional, so you don't have to complete this extra personal statement if it's not relevant. If you've said everything you want to say in your UCAS personal statement, then that's absolutely fine. We're not expecting you to write anything more than that. But if you are in a situation where you're applying for a very different course at Cambridge, or a course that you know has a very different emphasis at Cambridge, then it just gives you a little bit of an extra opportunity to explain to us what it is you're interested in Cambridge, or add in something, another supercurricular activity, for example, that is relevant just for us.
Yes, I think Shivani, you very nicely put about natural sciences, because that is an example at Cambridge where there is essentially no parallel course at any other university, and you will probably be aiming to study a single science at other universities in one way or another. So you should always write your personal statement for the subjects that you want to study elsewhere, because we fully understand that our natural sciences course is an unusual one. And it's the same with our engineering course, for example, because again, you might want to do, say, aerospace engineering at another university. You cannot specialize in Cambridge until you get to the third year. So think about that. The only thing I would say is that applying for different courses is one thing, but I think very disparate would be something that I wouldn't recommend, because basically you've got to show your enthusiasm for the subject that we're going to be interviewing you for and offering you a place to do. And we want to be sure that you really want to do it. And if you put down something completely different at another university, I think it would be difficult for us to really think that that was the case.
Thank you, Julia. You hit the nail on the exact question I was going to ask after Stuart finished his explanation. So thank you for that. And for fellow international students who are debating between applying to different countries, I'd just like to say that this is a very apt example of how different countries and their systems of education differ. So in the UK, they do expect that you are certain about the subject that you want to study at uni, and therefore the entire system is catered towards that. So if you find yourself being pulled in different directions by very, very different subjects, then perhaps you want to reconsider if maybe the UK system of universities maybe not so suited for you. So for example, in the US and Canada, you can enter university without even declaring a major or declaring a subject. So, if you are in a position where you are debating between different countries, consider these aspects as well and see if you are at this point in your life able to decide what you want to study at uni, and then think about aspects related to that. Moving on to the next question. Due to COVID or other reasons, I don't have much shadowing or internship experience. What do I talk about then? And I think we can just take this question to reiterate all the wide variety of things you can talk about apart from just reading and shadowing and internships.
Yeah. So, as a general rule, even without COVID, it's very difficult for most students to gain any really useful, relevant work experience. So we do not, therefore, in general, expect students to have any. So don't worry about it. I think that's an important thing to be aware of. However, there are vocational subjects, like, for example, medicine and veterinary medicine, where we are looking for some sort of work experience. And we're looking for work experience in a caring or service role in health or related field, or in the case of vets, looking after animals. Even then, work experience in hospitals and care homes and GPs and veterinary surgeries can be really difficult to come by, and it certainly was very difficult to come by over the COVID period. So you should perhaps be looking at other areas where you can usefully do something that can prepare you for the profession. I mean, for example, if you're interested in medicine, perhaps the thing might be to go and ask if you could work at a pharmacy at the weekend or something like that, or help a physiotherapist in an office or whatever. In the case of a vet, you should definitely be looking for getting work experience on a farm or in a cattery or a dog's home or something like that, so that you get experience of looking after animals. And all universities that offer medicine and veterinary medicine will be looking for that sort of work experience. There is the odd occasion when people cannot actually organise anything. And if that is the case, you probably should mention it briefly in your personal statement. But otherwise, those are the sort of areas where it is very important to have work experience. And in fact, it's an important thing to incorporate into your personal statement, and to explain what you've learned from your experience in there. And that's another thing that people will be looking for. They don't just want to be told, oh, I worked in a cattery. They want to be told something that maybe you really learned from the work that you did in that cattery.
Thank you so much, Julia. And I think that beautifully connects to the next question as well, where people often ask, in Cambridge, the application is so academic centric, but in perhaps other UK universities, there's a bit more flexibility with that. So can I include extracurricular interests and hobbies, and how much of it do I include if I know I want to apply to Oxbridge, which is more academically focused?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We do want to hear about your other activities and what else you get up to in your life alongside your academic work. So yes, for an Oxbridge personal statement, we are expecting about 80% of it to be academic focused. And then typically the very last 20% of the structure of the whole personal statement, that last part, excuse me, that last part will be focused around the other things that you enjoy getting up to in your life. And we're interested to see that, because we want to see that you can manage your time well and still do really well at school or college. We want to see also that you have something called spare capacity, so that if you are doing really well at the minute and keeping up these other activities, whatever they might be, then it's a good sign that you could probably step that up when you get to university and you have to manage your time a bit more. It's much more independent learning and everything that comes with university life. In terms of what kind of activities, we at Cambridge really don't mind. We don't place any value on any particular activity at all. So you might be, involved in sports teams at a local level or a national level or a school level. All of those things are possible. You might be playing a musical instrument. You might be involved in arts in some other way, theatre, for example. You might be working. You might simply be holding down a job at the weekends or part-time work. And you can mention that as well. That shows us that you can manage your time and you can have responsibility, etc. You might be volunteering, helping younger pupils in your school, or something, charity in the local area. We really don't mind. We're just interested to see that you are, a fully rounded human being, and as I said, that you have something extra going on in your life that shows us that you can manage your time well.
Thank you, Stuart. And I think Julia sort of touched upon this in her previous answer, but a good tip I was given by my counselor at school was, apart from simply listing the activities, try and connect it to what you've learned from them, so it directly becomes academically applicable because you're focusing on transferable skills. So for example, if you're talking about how you were in a sports team or you were a team captain, you can talk about how you did that for these many years and how that taught you leadership and teamwork and discipline. So these skills are just applicable no matter whether you're talking about academic or extracurricular. So I think if you're really worried about putting stuff in there, just make sure you're explicitly making links back to your course and how that might help you as a student at university. Okay, so the next question is, how much weightage is given to the personal statement in the overall application?
When we consider your application at Cambridge, we actually look at everything that we have on you and about you. Things like your academic profile to date, your A-level or other predictions, your school reference, your performance in any pre-interview tests, your performance at interview, and we've got your personal statement. We look at your application in the round. We call that holistically. So the personal statement plays into this, but we don't give any element of your application a particular weighting. We're just looking at your whole application. So I don't think I would say that we could say, oh, it's 20%. We don't put those sorts of numbers on it. It's just looking at the whole you.
Thank you so much, Julia. And we've reached our last two questions now. So the second last penultimate question is, what are the most commonly made mistakes or pitfalls to avoid?
Yeah, it was a really tough one, actually, because I don't think there are that many common mistakes or pitfalls, actually. I mean, I think it's fair to say, isn't it, that personal statements have been drafted and probably redrafted and probably redrafted again. And there will be support from your teachers and hopefully other people around you who can support your university application. So they are almost always well written and well structured. And we get to learn all of these amazing things about you as an applicant that we've been talking about already. I suppose one thing that you really must be aware of from a Cambridge perspective is the possibility of being asked about things in your interview, if you're invited to interview, asked about what's in your personal statement. And so I have myself over the years found myself asking an applicant something about a book they've read in their personal statement, or a film they've watched. And then it turns out that actually they haven't really fully understood what they've read, or in one case hadn't even watched the end of the film that they had mentioned in their personal statement. So if you do say you've read something, please read it and revise your, you don't have to reread it entirely before the interview, but at least make sure you feel like you know what you've said and feel confident to be able to say something else about it at the interview. And that doesn't mean, being, writing a long prepared speech about what you've written about in your personal statement. It just means being familiar with what you've talked about. And I think, again, typically from an arts and humanities perspective, applicants might often want to impress us by using, complicated terms that they've come across in their reading. They don't really fully understand exactly what it is they've talked about. And as I said earlier on, we're not expecting you to know everything already. We're not expecting a final polished product. But equally, if you have mentioned a word like, I don't know, postmodern or something like that, then do make sure you have a bit of an understanding of what this might mean before you come in for an interview. And I think being honest, actually, I think that's true of what all universities will want to see in your personal statement. They will want you to be honest about your genuine interests and motivations. And so perhaps one mistake is to try and big yourself up a little bit and make yourself out to be something that you're not actually.
Yes, I think one of the things is that some students think they really want to appear really interesting by saying something wacky in their personal statement. And their teachers may well have said, no, don't do that. That's not what's required. It won't make you look better. Listen to what your teachers say when they give you advice about this, because they probably have a lot of experience, a lot more than you do. And so just be careful about trying to make an impression by being wacky, for example. And it is something that, looking at the science things, I do try to see whether I think this is somebody who's trying to put over things in a rather strange way. You know, you just want to be straight down the line with this, and you don't need to be funny. You know, that's a waste of space as well. So just put yourself over as somebody who's really keen on their subject, and that's the thing, not any of these other possible problems that you might want to put over. I would also say that on Stuart's point about reading the books, that for many years I used to interview in physical sciences, students would always say they'd read A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking. Well, as I could never get beyond about the first 3 pages, I was very surprised by this, and when probed, you found they had not read it. It just looked good.
Thank you, Julia and Stuart. And our final question is, would you like to end with a few top tips and pieces of advice that you'd like to give to anyone who's currently drafting their personal statement?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've probably given quite a lot of advice already throughout this conversation. I think the last thing I would say actually is, and this might sound a little counterintuitive, but enjoy the process of writing this personal statement, because I think we said near the beginning, this is your chance to shine and show us how excited you are about studying this degree course. And if you're not actually enjoying that process and studying what you're doing now in preparation for that, then that's a sign that it's not the right degree course for you. So if you have picked the right course and you are really genuinely motivated and interested, then it will be an enjoyable thing to do. Challenging, yes, we know that. You know, it is hard to fit these ideas into a structure and a compressed amount of writing and get across, you know, to potentially 5 universities, you know, who you are as a scholar. But you know, you should, you know, by the time you've kind of, as we said before, you know, worked on it and shown it to people who can help and support you, I hope, and, you know, read it out loud as well to make sure you can hear what it sounds like. Sometimes that's really helpful. You know, by the time that, you should be really pleased with the final product, and we would be very pleased to read it.
As Shivani said, I think start by jotting things down as they come along into your mind. Don't try to write your beautiful, coherent bit of prose straight away. And in fact, I mean, I could say that as a scientist, the way that I would always start a paper, if I was writing about some topic, is to write down all the ideas that I've got to collect together and put into it. And as you collect those ideas together, it's a really good way, as Stuart says, of starting to think about, is this the subject I want to do? It's a really good way of confirming that it is indeed what you want to do and why you want to do it. So I think it's something that you will find really helpful, actually. Just over the next little while, start thinking about it and collecting your thoughts together.
Thank you so much, Stuart and Julia. And I think, as with everything else, the hardest part is actually just starting. So I wrote at least 6 to 7 drafts of my personal statement, and my first draft looks nothing like my final draft. But it helps to have drafts because you have something to work on. So just put all your words on a piece of paper, type it out, write it out, whatever you prefer, and then make edits on it. That's I think a way better way of working. And as Julia mentioned, that's the same technique I use for writing scientific reports and stuff now, because it's much easier to edit and cut down than it is to constantly add more information. So put everything you want out first, and then decide which are the relevant bits, which do you want to edit, modify, etc., etc. So yeah. So that's all the questions for today. Thank you so much to Stuart and Julia for making time to answer all of these questions. I really hope, I'm sure they'd be helpful to everyone who's watching. And on behalf of the 3 of us, good luck for everyone who's drafting a personal statement. And yeah, don't stress too much about it, please. Any final words, Stuart and Julia?
No, just thank you for listening, and good luck with your personal statement and application in general.
Indeed. And as we've said, don't get yourself too stressed out about doing a personal statement. Just take it easy.